Hi, kids. These are the notes on word choice. I'm going to tell you right now that every single one of us is going to be able to do a row for word choice because word choice is a device that's relevant in every single piece of literature. So as you're listening to these notes, be aware that word choice will be relevant for you no matter what your piece of writing is. So the first thing I want you to think about is the idea that authors choose particular words to give a piece of writing a particular feeling. And this may not be intuitive to you as a young writer yourself, because when you are writing, you're probably just writing with the words that come into your head. You think of the words and you put them down, and you don't necessarily stop and spend time deciding which word is going to be the best word. Whoops, gotta plug in. Um, and that's true for a lot of grown-ups as well. A lot of grown-ups just write the first words that come into their heads. But when we're reading literature, we're reading writing by master writers, people who are experts at this craft. So we have to understand that when they write a word, they have spent time thinking about that word. For an expert writer, it's not necessarily minutes or hours. The process can become almost automatic, but especially when writers strive to be excellent and they're first starting out, they really can sit there for a while, use a thesaurus, really take their time to try to come up with what is the perfect word for this concept I'm trying to communicate. And so the reason writers are able to do this is that you could have more than one word with basically the same meaning, but with a different emotion behind it. And that's because of this thing called connotations. Connotations. You don't have to guess how to spell that because it actually says it here on the next line. So, a connotation is an idea or a feeling that a word makes you think about that goes beyond its literal definition. So, it's all the other stuff that comes into your head when you think of that word. Um, in the human brain, we have this thing called spreading activation, where when a concept is activated in your brain, there are immediately a whole host of other images, memories, words, sounds, sensations that are summoned that are closely connected to it. Like you can't think of elephant without thinking also of 10 other things that are connected to elephant. And for some of you, that'll be like circus, or some of you, it'll be zoo, and some of you, it'll be jungle. But it's going to be, for most of us, it's going to be pretty similar. Like, in a room of 100 people who think of the word elephant, well, some of them are going to think of circus and some of them are going to think of jungle, but like none of them are going to think of skyscraper, right? So words have connotations, these sets of things that are summoned in the mind when you hear those words. And they're shared in a culture. All of us who have grown up in the same culture and speak the same language understand the connotations that words have. So writers can use this to their advantage. They know a word's connotations and they pick a particular word with a particular set of connotations because they know that word's going to make you think of all these other things. So I'll show you a couple examples. Um, think about somebody marching and somebody stomping. These are two verbs, and both of them basically mean like walking with a sort of heavy, purposeful stride, right? But actually, um, they have two slightly different sets of connotations. And as a writer, I'm going to pick one or the other depending on which set of connotations I want to summon in the mind of my reader. So if I say she marched down to the principal's office, marching is something that like soldiers do, or maybe people in a marching band or people in a parade. So if I wanted to summon any of these ideas in the mind of my reader, march would be a verb I would pick. But maybe I'm going to say she stomped down to the principal's office if I want to make my reader think like specifically of the emotion anger, or maybe make my reader think about somebody having a tantrum, like little kids stomping their feet. Right. So this is a different set of connotations, other stuff you think of, even though a character marching and a character stomping would both look pretty similar, right? Think about these adjectives, scrawny versus slender. If a writer wanted to describe like a tree in the front yard and the tree was really, really like narrow, a writer could call it a scrawny tree or a slender tree. And both of those trees might be, the same little tree. But if we call it a scrawny tree, there is this set of connotations that goes with scrawny, like weak, undernourished, underdeveloped, ugly to look at, sick, whereas slender might make you think, oh, a slender tree, it's graceful, it's pretty, it's young and beautiful, right? Even though they're both the same size. Youthful versus immature, these are two adjectives that technically mean the same thing, but the first one has a much more positive connotation. Almost any adult would enjoy being described as youthful, but nobody, child or adult, wants to be described as immature. Let's look at the poem I use a lot as an example for you, this Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. I put in bold 4 places. Did I do 4? No, I did 3. 3 places where, to me, it seems like Robert Frost probably had a lot of options. And let me just say for a second, not every single word in the English language has connotations. The only words that have connotations are words where there is another word with that same meaning, right? We don't have another word that means his. There isn't like an alternative to his. So, and there isn't an alternative to like to. There isn't an alternative to are or I. So these really basic like pronouns and prepositions and some like really, really basic verbs like are aren't going to have connotations because there isn't another word with the same meaning, but a different set of associations. So the words that an author has the option to play with, the words that an author has some choice around, are usually verbs and adjectives and adverbs. So, and sometimes nouns, but verbs and adjectives and adverbs are the big ones. So, action words and describing words. So, look at this. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here. When we read this, we don't necessarily think to ourselves, oh, Robert Frost spent a lot of time coming up with these words, but he most certainly did. And some of the words he may have considered for this particular moment might have been pausing, staying, halting, ceasing, maybe standing. Any of those would have fit with the rhythm he's creating, and would have communicated the same content, right? He will not see me standing here would work just as well for that rhythm and would have communicated the same idea, but it doesn't have the same set of connotations. The connotations of stopping are different from these other words. It's better than pausing or standing because it really communicates the full finality. Like in the first stanza, he wants us to think that he might not start again. Like stopping means it's over, right? So that's better than pausing for what he's trying to communicate. Pausing carries the implication that maybe it's going to begin again soon. And standing, same thing. So stopping is more final, which he wants. But he doesn't want like halting, which might feel kind of, military. And ceasing feels maybe a little too fancy or formal. If you skip down to the next stanza, he's describing the environment where he's stopping. Between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. Here are 3 other possibilities you could have written. Dimmest is not as good because it's not as, it doesn't feel as serious. Like when something's dark, that has an implication that it's not great, right? And dim does not have that same power. Blackest has the same technical definition, right? But blackest is like too dark. Blackest is like, most evil. And he doesn't quite want us to think it's a spooky Halloween night. He just wants us to think it's a very, very sad and lonely night. And dark has that feeling to it. He had a lot of choices with lovely. There's so many other things that mean like nice to look at, right? There's so many synonyms, even if you limit it just to 2-syllable ones that fit his rhythm. But lovely is perfect here. Stunning would be too high energy, too intense. Stunning is like so beautiful you literally feel frozen in place. And that energy is too over the top for the very quiet energy of this poem. Pretty isn't serious enough. Pretty has this sort of childlike feeling, like pretty is a word you would describe like, your cousin who like put on a cute dress for a special occasion and she's 5, right? It needs to feel more serious than that. Lovely has a seriousness to it. It's a word you might use to describe like a grown adult. You wouldn't use lovely for like a 5-year-old, right? So it has some dignity to it that pretty doesn't have. It's a more gentle word than stunning or gorgeous. It has a little bit more intensity though than pleasant. Pleasant's like, yes, I like it slightly more than I do not like it, right? Lovely is 100% yes, I'm positive about it. It's really, really nice to look at, but it's low energy at the same time. So, okay, so you're going to be doing this kind of thinking about your own poem. And there are a lot of different ways to do this thinking, but here's the way I've come up with that I think is pretty effective for students. I want you to go to one of these websites that you see linked here. All right, so you're going to open your note-taking grid. You're going to go to a new row and write word choice in the yellow column, right? And then I want you to go to one of these 2 websites, and I'll show you what that looks like. And then you're going to go to your poem and copy all of its text. So Control C, there, I've copied all of its text. And I want you to go over here and see it says click the A icon and draw a text box. I'm talking about this icon right there. And then step 6 is paste the text of your poem. And if only some of your poem appears, keep doing it until you've pasted all the text of your poem. So I just did Control V and I pasted the text of my poem. In my case, only the first 3 stanzas appeared because I didn't have enough room. So I'm just gonna do another text box as the instructions told me to. And I'm gonna paste the last stanza. Now, here's the fun part, what I think is fun. Use the dotted rectangle tool, that's this one, to select individual words and drag them to different corners of the screen and group them according to subject or emotion. So some of the examples I give you are, you could put nature words into a group, sad words into a group, color words, scary words, happy words, just any sort of like theme that you see emerging among the words. So dotted rectangle tool, the first thing that occurs to me is I know my poem has a lot of nature words, so I'll just put all my nature words together. So you click and drag to choose a word. There's woods again. And then you click and drag to, you gotta get that sort of cross icon to move it. And you're gonna keep doing that until you have moved all the words to the sections that you want to create. Now, if I continue doing this for my whole poem, what I end up with, and I know this from experience because I've done this for this poem, is I end up with like one big category, which I'm calling nature words, like things that are outdoors, and I'll put animals in there too. And then I have another category of words that have to do with being cold. So frozen goes in there. I want to put snow in there, but I already have it here, so I could put snow in two categories. I think I said that in number 7. Use Control-C to copy a word and paste it into more than one. So I'm going to select snow, Control-C, and then Control-V. There it appears. Okay, frozen, snow, and flake is going to go over there. And then I'll keep doing this until I've got like a couple really significant categories. I've got the word dark and the word darkest. What else could I put with dark and darkest that's sort of connected? Evening, right? That's a dark time. And maybe sleep, because you sleep at night. So I'm going to say this is the category of like dark things slash sleeping. What else could I put? All right, well, let's just assume I kept going here. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at number 9, decide which group of words is biggest or the most emotionally powerful. And these are the words I'm going to write about in my evidence box. So I've got a big category of nature words, right? But I also like this category. It's not the biggest, but it's interesting to me. Darkest, dark, evening, sleep, sleep. Maybe I'll do this one because this one I feel like is emotionally powerful, these words. Or I could do this one too, even though it's not a big category. I could say it's emotionally powerful. In my evidence box, I'm going to paste those words that appear in my chosen group, and I'm going to give a line number for each word. So if I were going to do this one, for example, I'd have to go back and say this comes from line 8, and evening comes from line 8 as well, and dark comes from line 13, and sleep comes from lines 15 and 16. And then in the second box, I'm going to write a feeling sentence. And my feeling sentence is going to be what I produce if I imagine I'm showing just these words to somebody who hasn't read the poem. How would just these words feel? What would these words make somebody think about? So if I went up to a total stranger and showed them just this, right? I said, hey, what do you think of when you see these words? Or what do you feel when you see these words? The answer to that question would be what would go in my feeling box. So when somebody sees the words darkest, dark, evening, sleep, sleep, maybe it makes them think about, I don't know, it feels kind of like peaceful or maybe sad, peaceful and sad, maybe. You know, it's a little gloomy, but also, you know, sleep is restful. So, and evening's kind of a pretty word. So maybe both sad and peaceful. The point in doing this exercise is I want you to sense or notice a theme, like a recurrent theme in the words that your author is choosing. So in my case, Robert Frost chose darkest, dark, evening, and sleep, which he put twice, because they all kind of go together. Even though they're sprinkled in different locations in the poem, they all work together to contribute this one sort of kind of sad and kind of peaceful feeling. And if I stop for a second and ask myself, does that fit with my overall sense of the poem so far? Yeah, it does. Like I've already seen that this poem has sadness in it and peacefulness at the same time. So it does make sense that the words create a sad and peaceful feeling. All right, so the final tip I want to give you here is if you don't finish this in one sitting, you can screenshot this image or choose Save As to automatically download it, and then you can keep editing the image later. Save As is up here, and I think we know how to screenshot. All right, that's it, and as you're working on this, if you have any questions, please come and ask me.